You probably know someone who earns good money and has almost nothing to show for it. Not because they're irresponsible, not because they're bad at math, but because they've been playing the game without ever crossing the one threshold that actually changes how the game is played. Nobody told them what that number was. Most people never find out. Here's what's strange about wealth. It doesn't build linearly. There are specific points in the accumulation process where the rules quietly shift, where the same decisions produce different outcomes, where the same income suddenly creates more traction. Most financial content talks about destinations. Almost none of it talks about these thresholds. $25,000 is the first one that genuinely matters, and what happens on the other side of it has nothing to do with luxury, and everything to do with how your brain operates, how your career moves, and how fast the next dollar arrives. Princeton researchers spent years studying what financial pressure actually does to decision-making. Not the obvious stuff like buying cheaper groceries, the invisible stuff. What they found was that when money is tight, mental attention narrows, not because people become less intelligent, but because the mind is genuinely occupied, running calculations in the background that people with savings never have to run, every hour, every day. The result is that entire categories of opportunity never get considered, not rejected, just never seen. The mental space required to notice them simply isn't available. Think about two people starting from the same place. Jordan saves aggressively for 2.5 years, reaches $25,000, and keeps it as a foundation while continuing to invest. Alex earns the same income, spends just slightly more each month, and never breaks past $8,000. 5 years later, same job, same salary, but Jordan negotiated a raise 8 months ago. Not because of talent, but because the ask came from a position of calm instead of desperation. Alex hasn't asked. The timing never feels right. And it never feels right because financially it never quite is. This is what $25,000 actually buys that the balance itself doesn't show. It buys negotiating position, the ability to say no and mean it, time to make a real decision instead of a forced one. The Federal Reserve's research on household financial behavior shows that liquid savings below a certain threshold correlates directly with reduced career mobility. People don't stay in situations they want to leave because they're comfortable. They stay because leaving has a cost they can't absorb. Here's where the numbers start telling a different story than most people expect. Put away $800 a month, earn a modest 8% return, and your first $25,000 arrives in about 27 months. That stretch is real. It requires saying no to things repeatedly, watching the number climb slowly, and trusting a process that doesn't feel dramatic while it's happening. Then something shifts. That $25,000 is no longer just sitting there. It's generating roughly $2,000 a year on its own. Your second $25,000 takes 22 months instead of 27. Not because you worked harder, because the first pile started pulling its weight alongside you. Keep going and the timeline keeps shrinking. At $500,000, that next $25,000 arrives in about 3.5 months, automatically, without extra effort. The process that once took years now takes a season. This isn't a trick, it's just what happens when scale meets time. But here's what matters more than the math. Reaching $25,000 from zero means you became someone who saves. That distinction sounds small. It isn't. You tracked where dollars were going. You said no to things you wanted, to social pressure, to the version of yourself that wanted to spend now. You did that consistently, for months. That's not a financial achievement. That's a character shift. The Millionaire Next Door study found that the behavior producing real wealth isn't sophisticated investing or exceptional income. It's making the same unglamorous decision repeatedly, without external validation, for a very long time. $25,000 is evidence you're capable of that. Bank of America's 2024 Financial Wellness Report found that households with less than $10,000 in liquid savings spend an average of 11 additional hours per month managing financial pressure, nearly 3 working weeks a year, not earning, not building, just maintaining. At $25,000, those hours start coming back, and time redirected toward income growth compounds in its own quiet way. One pattern worth naming, because it quietly undoes years of progress for a lot of people. Crossing $25,000 produces a real sense of arrival, and that feeling has a way of justifying a purchase that seemed out of reach before. The car upgrade, the trip that got postponed, the apartment that's a little nicer than necessary. What gets spent isn't just the dollar amount, it's the compounding those dollars would have done over the next 2 decades. It's the career leverage that came from knowing the cushion existed. Crossing a threshold and immediately stepping back over it doesn't just reset the balance, it resets everything the balance was quietly doing. Most people spend their entire working lives 1 or 2 paychecks from a decision being made for them, not because they earn too little, because they never crossed the threshold where they got to start making decisions from a different position. $25,000 is where that position becomes available, where the next move stops being dictated by what's urgent and starts being shaped by what's actually worth doing. That's not a small thing, and it doesn't require exceptional income or perfect timing. It just requires getting there, and then having the clarity to leave it alone.